The notion of teaching business ethics apart from how we do business is not very useful. The quality of how we do business, the quality of how we lead is the subject of ethics. So ethics is embedded in everything we do in the business world. And it has to do with how well we do things. It has to do with how we treat each other. It's not an independent subject. It's understanding the very fabric of both leadership and business. When I teach leadership courses, I point out the behaviors of people who've made a significant difference. Those behaviors can really be thought of along qualitative dimensions, i.e. they do good things. They are good leaders. They treat people with respect. They treat people fairly. They treat people with dignity. They tell the truth. They keep their promises. These are all attributes of effective leaders. And so consequently, they're embedded in how we think about leadership in any organization. The business ethics faculty do, at this time, quite a commendable job of incorporating ethics into leadership. For example, I happen to have taught in the first year this year, one of the 5 faculty, and every case we taught had a principal, had a primary actor, and the behaviors of those actors had a significant impact on the consequences for the others with whom they interacted. And so if you have people who don't behave effectively, i.e. They don't tell the truth, they don't keep their promises, they don't respect people, you have a set of consequences which is detrimental not only to the people involved, but detrimental to the whole notion of business and effective enterprise. The issues that we will face, first of all, are the obvious, the sense of global interdependence and global complexity. I think accompanying that is the increasing consequence of power and influence and wealth. And I think every time or any time you bring these 4 factors together, they lead to consequence. And I think it's incumbent that people be far more what I would call ethically mindful, far more thoughtful today because of these, 1, interdependencies, 2, complexities, 3, the dramatic increase of power and influence, individual behaviors, and subsequently group and nation consequence have increased. I think today you have to be more attentive to everything you do than ever in the past, because quite frankly we're connected, whether it's the internet or it's the intercontinental travel or we could go on and on and on. People today have to be more mindful as citizens of a global society than ever before. Everything people do, everything they say and do matters, and not to pay attention to that can lead people into difficulty. When we see difficulties arising in leadership issues and organizations, it's typically because there's been a blind spot. People have, for a moment, not paid attention to things. That mindlessness, we might even call it moral mindlessness, is not an intentional malevolence, but it has an intentional consequence. And I think that's what we have to be more attentive to. So I think young people who come to Darden, who assume leadership positions leaving Darden, are going to have to be far more intentional in their actions and far more cognizant of the broader consequences of everything they say and do. In many schools, in many fine schools, ethics is taught as almost a standalone subject. In fact, there may be, as we do, have several electives which are ethics-oriented. I think the strength of Darden in the first year is the fact that the ethics course is an essential and vital part of the first year, and the implications of that course, because of conversations with our colleagues, the implications of that course extend to other courses as a matter of just day-to-day interaction. In the second year, again, ethics is considered a vital part of the mindset and action set of our graduates. And so simply to take a course in ethics as a theoretical understanding is not what Darden's about. Darden is about the practical application of good thinking and good actions. And that's where I think we differentiate ourselves from many institutions. I was the executive director. The first dean insisted that he be the director, and I got to be the executive director. The highlights for me were, one, the creation of the center with its purpose around research, its purpose around teaching and case writing. And we were not the very first, but we were among the first business schools to, in fact, commit to have an ethics center. And we put a stamp on our school that said, and what became the Olson Center. It began as a Center for Applied Ethics. The Olson Center, thanks to the contribution to the Olson family, and Stuhr in particular, the Olson Center, I think, said that not only are ethics issues of interest, ethics are a vital part of the school. The people I invited to be on my first board had people like Ray Baumhart, Elmer Stotz, who was Controller General, really wonderful people who came to the school and gave of their time and energy. We had a marvelous chap named Don Jones who wrote the first several autobiographies or biographies, and he did a wonderful job. We've had, in fact, Linda Sharp Payne, who's now done extremely well at Harvard as an ethics and strategy professor, was part of our teaching group, again, back in the old building 20-some years ago. And I think those people and the willingness of people to come here to the school and contribute in ways that have been helpful not only to faculty, but helpful to faculty and students. Robert Greenleaf wrote Servant Leadership, much of it here in the Ethics Center domain. So we've had a very successful experience over the years with attracting very good people, Pat Warehane, Ed Freeman, and others who have done an exceptional job for the center in carrying the purpose of the center forward. It's interesting, the distinction being made between hard and soft skills, and I'm always fascinated by that dichotomy. Quite frankly, behaving in an effective and constructive manner is difficult, and I would argue hard. All we have to do is look at our contemporary corporate history of the Enrons and the WorldComs and et cetera. It's easy to cheat. It's hard not to. It's easy to dupe the books. It's hard not to. It's easy to keep your promises. It's hard not to. Okay? In a sense, it's reverse of that. It's easy to break your promises. It's hard to keep them. And in fact, today, we have a world where what is called hard stuff is, for most of our students, is called accounting and finance and operations. That's interesting. It's how you do accounting and finance and operations. It's the quality of how you do it that makes the difference. Now, you have to decide what's hard and what's soft. I would say anyone can cook a book. Anyone can create a fiction. Anyone can create a financial instrument which can lead you to a subprime mortgage crisis. What's hard is not to go down that road. It was easy to do that, and now we're all paying the hard cost. If we're not mindful of our actions, and if we're not attentive to the actions of others, things happen and we take them for granted. In a sense, they fall into that space called no big deal. Doesn't really matter. And I think the less attentive we are versus the being more mindful, a lot of things can fall into no big deal. For example, we're having this conversation. I agreed to show up. I could easily have said, no big deal, just a couple of folks doing a presentation. I have a lot of things to do. Now, I chose, for a host of reasons, to do what I'm doing. To me, keeping a promise, and to me, telling the truth, and to me, treating people with respect is a big deal. Does that make it right or wrong? No, to me, and that's what you asked me. If we're not willing to have students examine what for them are their moral rocks, if you will, their basic values, their basic assumptions, willing to examine them. We're not going to change them, but at least we're going to challenge people to think about them. The more people are willing to think about them, the less likely it is they will drift into that space called no big deal. Quite frankly, our society today is overwhelmed by a mindset of no big deal. You go to the airport, you ask if the plane's on time, the answer is yes, and it's not there. No big deal. You show up at a hotel and you have a guaranteed late arrival and there's no room, no big deal. And we can go on and on. The point is how we treat each other as a society, as individuals, I believe, you have to make up your own mind, is a big deal.